Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. And I have a very special guest to talk about their new film, Johannes Grenzfurthner. Thank you so much for coming on.
You nailed it. And my name is a very long and complicated name, even for German speaking people. So it's
There
a
you
very
go.
classic Upper Austrian name. And the fun part behind it is that Grenz
Mhm,
is a border of something, and
mhm.
Furte is like a shallow creek or ford. So in English, I would technically be Johnny Borderforder,
Very.
something like that. So that doesn't
And
sound like a war crime,
it's funny
as old
because
German names.
Conto is the bill or check you get at the end of a meal in Italian. So I guess it's like Shane
Oh,
Bill. So if you could
oh,
think about it
okay.
that way.
Maybe your ancestors were the guys who paid the bills. So
Could have been.
who
What's
knows?
interesting is my wife is super into like looking back and genealogy and stuff like that. And she actually found out my real actual last name is Conti with an E on the end.
Okay.
Like four generations back, somebody made an error somewhere. And just turned into that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always fun to see, like, especially like American names, because for me, as a kid, even that is even super much related to my experience of like watching films, because most of the films that I watched when I was a kid in the 80s, they were American products. And
Yeah.
then you see all the names at the end in the end credit scroll, and they're all, I don't know, like like Shane Pertovsky or something. It's always like weird mixtures of like American first names and something like
Yeah.
Slavic or German or something. So there's you see the melting pot of the United States
Mhm.
in the names,
Well,
and
because my family is very ethnically Italian American, but then my mom loved the movie Shane and Alan Ladd and named me after it. So
oh,
there you go. I was
there we
destined to
go.
love movies. I was named after one. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Johannes, thank you so much for coming on today. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'm going to let
Mhm.
you introduce your film Solvent.
Okay, wonderful. So my name is Johannes Grenzfurthner, as mentioned before. Technically, I'm not even sure what I am, but usually I say I'm a filmmaker and artist.
Mhm,
So I founded an art collective called Monochrome like a little bit more than 30 years ago. So I was still in high school when I did that. And Monochrome came out of this like classic tradition of making a fanzine back then,
mhm,
like Xeroxing and doing that stuff and like putting all the stuff that I was interested in into that fanzine with my friends. And we
mhm.
called it monochrome because we couldn't afford a color print. So it was a black and white Xerox. So that's how the name started.
Interesting.
And monochrome became all kinds of things. So we started as a fanzine, but we started doing like short films and conferences and published books and did performances. We're doing, which is kind of fun, a festival for cocktail robotics where we invite
Interesting.
people to build machines that serve alcohol or mix
Interesting.
alcohol or have bar conversations and stuff like that. So we do all kinds of weird stuff. And of course, I was always like a movie buff and a movie
Mhm,
nerd, and I really like that. Yeah, I started doing like short films pretty early on with the VHS
mhm.
camera of my dad and stuff like that. But uh, so really going into feature filmmaking was only like 10, 12 years ago or something like that. So kind of like late in my career, so to
Yeah.
speak. But I have the feeling I needed to go through a couple of iterations of things and kind of like acquire things that I finally decided now it's time to tackle the bigger projects
Yeah.
like feature filmmaking and stuff like that. So that's how I ended up in filmmaking. But you have seen my film, and I assume most of the people have seen my film as well because I'm gonna spoil the living
Okay.
hell out of it.
Yeah.
So there is, I mean, you see in the way that I made Solvent that it is a kind of like a different approach
Yeah.
to especially found footage filmmaking that than usually people like have attempt to do in
Mhm.
found footage filmmaking. And it's
Exactly.
fun to, yeah, yeah.
Well, and that was something that stood out to me as well because I guess what influenced that decision to take that approach to making this where it's like we have this POV going through this whole entire experience?
Mhm. So the thing is that Solvent is almost like the third part of a trilogy of films,
Okay.
and it started with Masking Threshold as the first one, and Rotten as the second one, and now Solvent. They are not connected in any way plot-wise. They are like not kind of like the like Grenzfurthner's cinematic universe or something
Yeah.
like that. So there's nothing coherent in plot-wise, but they share a common philosophy and a common aesthetic. For example, that you never see the face of the main character
Hmm.
in all three films and stuff like that. And what I like about found footage filmmaking is this kind of like intimacy. You were kind of like
Yep.
almost in the head of the main character. At the same time, what I hate about found footage filmmaking uh, and you can see that people feel that because if I get bad reviews on Letterboxd or something like that, it's always people complaining that it's not how it should be done. This is like, what is this? This is like, I'm getting
Hmm.
epilepsy. I expected a found footage film, and what is this? And so because I think that the biggest problem of found footage filmmaking is authenticity. Of
Hmm.
course, it is based on the idea of like that you see something through the eye of a person, but at the same time, I think it is so clingy to that concept. And my idea was to kind of like introduce layers of the past in the
Hmm.
found footage material because you have still the the perspective that what's happening to the guy pretty much in real time, but
Yeah.
you also have like historical footage that is kind of like cut in between. And in universe, it kind of works because the guy is editing his own footage.
Yeah.
He's creating a video diary, but it's not technically like I mean it is linear, but it's also not. So he puts stuff into the video to remind him of things or stuff that he wants to kind of like almost like an associative map or something like that. And I have the feeling that some people can't deal with that. They hate it,
Well,
especially
and
the hardcore found footage like community.
Mhm. Well, and found footage in general, I feel like is so hard to get right because it is very constraining if you do it right. Because the second that you leap that logic to make something work, people are going to complain about that and be like, it broke its own rules. Or, you have certain elements where you have to be consistently like, this camera has to be there the whole entire time for you to be able to see everything.
Yeah,
And the second that you get outside of that or try to play around with that, you start getting to the point where, like, where do I lose people? And I thought this was such an interesting experience because it's so visceral and uncomfortable to be in this person's perspective. And I think it's very interesting because not only is this a really uncomfortable horror film that puts you into some places that are very uncomfortable, but it's
yeah,
also dealing with very uncomfortable historical context. And I guess
absolutely.
thinking about where did that influence come from of trying to balance, it's like we're looking at this like these horrible historical elements
Oh yeah,
and then
yeah.
balancing that with here's some grotesque horror as well.
Absolutely. Like there is some really harsh, like how can I say dick mangling
Yes.
going on. And yeah, some people also have a problem with that. So like, oh my God, there's this realism and the horrors of the past and the Shoah and all of that. And then there is also this like weird dick mangling. What is this? And for me,
Mhm.
it is perfectly it just like fits together so well because if there is one thing that I can say about fascism is that it's
Mhm.
enormously grotesque. It's a
Mhm.
grotesque way of trying to structure societies, of dealing with problems, of just like it's the most horrendous and extreme form that humans came up with to to run a state or a
Mhm.
community. And for me, and also there is of course like an element of like toxic masculinity and all that
Yep.
stuff. So my idea was like to take this like really grotesque stuff with this like filthy like urine infested
Mhm.
like horrible like phallic imagery and I'm not even is a juxtaposition. I think it fits perfectly well to this like horrible ideology of fascism and how it bends reality and mangles reality. and
Well, I
also
think
mangles in the end the guy.
yes. Well, and I think that's an interesting, you start in this place where it's investigating all these horrible things from the past and seeing this embodiment of how this is mangling this man throughout this film and getting you to the point where it's like it's this physical embodiment of all these horrible societal things, and then it just so happens to push you into some very graphic specific places. And
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
admit,
yeah.
I'm someone who's like, I got into horror a lot later in my life. I'm a big baby, I get scared very easy, and I'm much more into like, if I were to pick my favorite type of horror films, it's much more atmospheric and stuff like that. Body horror is one element of horror that I struggle with sometimes. And
Hmm.
I'll admit, watching this movie, I'm like, it
Oops.
got me. And
Oh
it
yeah,
was one
yeah,
of
yeah.
those things where it's just like it had this very visceral kind of
Oh yeah.
reaction for me watching this film. And this film does put you in a place where it makes you feel uncomfortable because you should be,
Yeah, absolutely,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
processing all of these things. And I
And it's
guess
also like, yeah, it's also like there's the film is a strange element to it. But at the
mhm,
same time, it's almost like an essay. I mean, you
yep,
listen to a guy talk about his life
yep,
and his perspectives and all that stuff. And that is also something that you hardly see.
mhm,
And I kind of like the idea of like having like a certain pacing in the film that of course as a horror film nerd rewards you with
mhm,
certain gags, like
yeah,
certain like very visceral uh, body horror elements, but at the same time it's also something, although I know that the film is very kinetic and very fast paced and
yeah,
very like epileptic at times, but it's still, I mean, you listen to John Gryce's wonderful voice like
mhm,
as he's kind of like talking about his like fucked up life, and
yeah,
and then it's merging into the voice of the fucked up Nazi,
yeah,
and for me, like making films is always about like creating something that I haven't seen before and that I would like to see. I mean,
yeah,
and some filmmakers have a completely different approach to that. Like I would like to present something that has not been there before. Some
mhm,
people try to perfect the thing of like, especially in horror filmmaking, telling the same story again, 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 but make it better. Kind of like
mhm,
almost like there's this like iterative approach to horror filmmaking. We make another exorcism film. It's kind of
yeah,
like every other exorcism film, but it's just like a better version of that. And
yeah.
I always kind of hated that because I want to be surprised by stuff.
Well, and to be frank, I don't know the last time I watched an exorcism film that was actually fresh or unique feeling at all, because how much can you do with like somebody's having an exorcism?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
you're leaning into that, but this was a very unique experience. And I think that is very interesting as we're hearing this man processing through this, his own history, this twisted history, and how this fully takes him over and how it does start affecting him physically through where it started like thinking about this mentally and processing this through
yeah,
his
yeah,
head and then how it
absolutely.
fully takes him over. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess in
And he's
terms,
and he's more adaptive in that way
yeah,
because in the beginning when the Polish like historian Kanda is first confronted with that, it's not a curse, but with that the pipe and all that stuff, like
yeah,
she kind of like completely breaks down because she can't process that horribleness, so to speak. But he
mhm,
himself is such a conflicted character and has
yeah,
done so many weird things and horrible things in his life that he is more susceptible in a certain way to the whisperings
mhm,
of the Nazi and the connections to the Nazi.
yeah,
And it's almost like his redemption arc is kind of like trying to get out of this or
mhm,
making amends with his own past, but it doesn't really work. And he's
yeah,
kind of like at least trying to get the most out of his fucked up situation.
absolutely. And I wanted to ask too, because like obviously you you co-wrote this, you directed this,
Mhm.
you're in it. I guess what was the biggest rewarding experience that you had creating Solvent?
Oh, I mean, it is. So the whole thing started. I mean, there's a whole backstory to it. The whole thing
Yeah.
started because there was always drama in our family, which is small, but of
Hmm.
course, in families, doesn't matter how big they are, there's always
Yeah.
drama. And so my mother never talked really to her sister, and the sister inherited the building from my grandfather. In 2014 when he died. So he actually died the same year that supposedly the Nazi in the film
Mm.
died. So and the Nazi is played pretty much by the archival footage of my own grandfather. So there's
Mm.
a whole story to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the moment that I went into that farm for the first time, 10 years later, when my aunt died and her cousin took over the property, I could, for the first time, because of the family stuff, for the
Yeah.
first time go back into that house. And I spent some of the loveliest moments of my childhood on that farm, like
Yeah.
building tree houses and stuff like that. So there, I have a really strong, like nostalgic relationship to that place. And then I came into that house. I opened the door, like in the film, the
Yeah.
characters going into the and seeing this like filth and because my aunt was very messy and kind of
Hmm.
like leaving stuff around. There was like cat shit and you wouldn't
Yeah.
horrible, yeah, and the mold everywhere. So I saw in my memories how the place looked like and now how it looks now. And that kind of like gave me the idea of like I should play with that and I should play
Mm.
also with the property, with probably our own family history and all that stuff. And that kind of like started the writing process. And then I got Benjamin Roberts on board because I needed a sparring partner because I
Mm.
knew that I would be super okay with all the Austrian-based plot lines and all that
Mm.
stuff. But because he's an American, he lived in Nashville at that time. He has a lot of friends in the military, so it was
Mm.
good to have someone uh, to help and create and shape the American character,
Yeah.
Holbrook. So, and that's then how we ended up like writing the script together.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting, drawing upon those very specific and very relatable and influential experiences from your own life. And that is something very interesting of, going back and just seeing this decay of something that was so special to you
Yeah,
at one point in
absolutely.
your
Yeah.
life. And I could definitely see how that translated into the film for sure.
And
And
it's also true for the history of Austria in
yeah,
general, because I mean Austria likes to see itself as this like nation of culture and Mozart
yeah,
and good cakes and good music, and people tend to forget the mass murder. And there are many Austrian conservatives and super right wingers who say like, well, there was no Austria between 1938 and 1945, so we don't have a problem. But I mean, most of the concentration camps were run by Austrians. I mean,
yeah.
Schindler's List, that the evil guy in Schindler's List was an Austrian, and so there is this like strange hole in the soul of
Mhm.
Austrian culture. Of course, especially with my grandparents' generation, because they
Yeah.
didn't want to talk about that stuff, what was happening, and sometimes it was probably better. In my case, the guy who became the Nazi piss demon in my film was the
Mm.
grandfather who was not the Nazi. So
Yeah.
he was of course part of the Luftwaffe and stuff like that, but he was never an ideological Nazi. He was just
Mm.
like he was military guy. And the other grandfather, so on my father's side, he was the real Nazi. He never talked a word about the war. He destroyed everything after the war was over. He was even part of the Nazi party before the war started, when it was still illegal in Austria to be a
Mm.
Nazi. So he was the hardcore Nazi, and he also was on the Eastern Front. And so I actually don't want to know what that guy did.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me that was kind of like also like an interesting like base layer of having Austrian history, personal history, and kind of like trying to mangle that
Mm.
into like some form of cohesive narrative.
Well, and I think it's very interesting how that all layers together. And this is also very interesting. Like, I born in New Jersey. I've lived my whole entire life in New Jersey. Being an American, thinking about like this is a very topical thing because there's a lot of people in my country who don't want to remember or even put a spotlight on anything bad
Yeah,
that
yeah,
this country has done. It's just like We've done some really bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Yo,
And
yo, yo, yo.
it's one of those things where
And it's in the film because I mean
yeah,
the stuff like with Desert Storm and all that. I mean, you can have all
yeah,
like detailed discussions about all of that political stuff, of course, yeah. But I mean that's why like a lot of people say like, well, it's the Nazi film, but it's not technically only the Nazi film. It's also the story of Holbrook, and it's the
yeah,
story of like the Yugoslav civil war and all that stuff. So it's in general, I guess, a reflection about fascism in all
yeah.
its variants. Yeah.
Well, and I think that makes it even more interesting in terms of how that connects to so many different types of things. But I always like to wrap up my discussions about a film with
Mhm.
a filmmaker of like, obviously, your film Solvent is out. What's that one reason why people should go check out your film?
I show you the reason. 1 second.
Okay,
Because there's a cool pipe in it.
very nice.
It's Grandpa. Grandpa. Mwah, my beloved Grandpa.
There you go.
He's always sitting in the back here
Mhm.
of my desk here because I have no idea what I should do with Grandpa. And
Well, there you go.
nobody now will understand why that is Grandpa. And but I think it's probably teaser enough to
Yeah.
draw people into the mystery of Solvent.
Well, it certainly is something tantalizing to get some interest for sure. So I appreciate that. But
Yeah.
I guess, Johannes, where can people check out your film?
Oh, it's on a couple. I mean, if you go to Letterboxd or some of those services, there's always a list
Yep.
on what streaming services you can watch it. It's yeah, it's on Apple and Fandango and like a couple of those things. What I really appreciate, like because it is kind of especially as an artist who did a lot of stuff like in real life with real people, might jump into filmmaking. And that's why I like to go to film festivals a lot, is seeing the reaction of people and hearing what people think about my film,
Yeah.
if they like it or not. I mean, that's always, I mean, it's a controversial film, so
Yeah.
it's quite obvious that people might hate it. No problem with that. I didn't make a Paddington Bear film, so it's like it's quite obvious. But it's quite fun to read what people think about it.
Yeah.
So in case you watch the film, and leave a letterboxd review, because on
Mhm.
letterboxd it's almost a way of like peeking into the minds of people, what they think. And sometimes people write whole essays, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like the one line, oh, there were too many dicks in the film, I hated it, or something like that, you know. But at least it's like it's a way of kind of like grasping
Mhm.
what people take out of it. So in case you watch the film because of this interview, leave me a little comment on
Yeah.
Letterboxd. I read them all. I really read them
There
all.
you go. I Letterbox is such an interesting experience too, because like I'm more of the they're not particularly long, but like I leave like an honest perspective, like how I felt about the film. Anytime my wife and I go see a film, her favorite thing to do is bring up all the funniest letterboxed reviews that people have left about the film on the
Yeah.
way home. And my wife's much more of a leave a sentence that's kind of pithy and funny
Oh yeah, yeah.
in terms
But
of
that's
that
also
kind of
good.
thing.
And
Yeah,
sometimes you see that you like in the most popular like review section, you have like one thing
yeah,
that's almost like a two-page essay and the one snarky line,
yeah,
and both of them have like 200 likes or something like that. So that's good. I think it's now that kind of like IMDb as a reviewing
mhm,
platform kind of died.
yeah,
I like the more the brain observation that I can
yeah.
get on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I'd much quicker go to Letterbox to get people's actual perspective on a film than go to IMDb for sure. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, IMDb is great for like
yeah,
the factuals, you know, like all the stuff, who
mhm,
was there. So
yes,
it's like it's irreplaceable in that
yeah,
way. But Letterboxd is way more an interesting, socially engaging experience
mhm,
about filmmaking. Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, so Johannes, we're gonna shift gears then and learn a little bit more about you. I
Sure.
know everybody loves answering this question, but what's your favorite film?
Oh, what is my favorite film is always the film that I'm thinking the most about in the last couple of weeks or something like
Hmm,
that. So that's kind of it's kind of hard one. But I want to answer the question in that way that there's one film I've only seen that film once, and it was like 15 years ago, probably, or something like that. And I'm not sure I want to watch it again, but it got stuck so in my brain. I'm not sure
Mhm.
it's my favorite film, but it's a film that I return to it
Yeah.
frequently. And it's a film called Compliance. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Um,
And it's called Compliance, and it's a film about uh, a prank phone caller who calls into a McDonald's uh,
Interesting.
restaurant and pretty much like tricking the people through his faked authority as a fake police officer into doing things.
Mhm.
And the weirdest part was that I saw that film at the film festival in Tel Aviv. Uh, and there were people walking out, and there were like people from that around that age of like, like direct relatives of Holocaust
Yeah.
survivors or people who were Holocaust survivors. And of course the film is not about the Holocaust, but the film is about compliance and how
Yeah.
people it's a horror film, but it is not really a horror film. It's more like a psychological drama. But
Interesting.
I really like to recommend that film to people. That's why I'm saying it right now. So
So I haven't seen this one, but Craig Zobel, who directed it, I've seen some of his other films, and
it's fun because I've
definitely,
not seen any of his other films. I only know that one. Are the other
yeah.
films good?
So I like Z for Zachariah a decent amount that he made. It looks like a couple of years after this, and he also made that film The Hunt, which made so
Ah,
much controversy here in the United States because it was like
okay.
hunting political adversaries and stuff like that, and it
Ah,
wound
yeah,
up
yeah, yeah,
getting
yeah.
like taken out of theaters and like hunted months afterwards, and it was such a big controversial thing. It's very interesting. He certainly is the type of filmmaker who doesn't, he doesn't pull punches or try to like veer away from challenging
Yeah, yeah,
topics or
yeah, yeah.
anything. So I'll
Good for
be
him. Good
interested
for
to
him.
check that
Maybe
out
also
though.
not good for him. You never know, like what that does to your career. But I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Now, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
It was, in fact, the first time. So the first time I went to a movie theater was
Mhm.
with my elementary school class,
Okay.
and we watched Tom and Jerry,
Nice.
which is really fun. And then the first film,
Yeah,
and I put that into Solvent. It's in Solvent. The first film I ever watched in a movie theater with my grandmother was E.T.
there you go.
He the extraterrestrial, and
Hmm.
I'm not spoiling that, but there is a true story of
Hmm.
that experience of with going with my grandmother to see ET in Solvent. So that's not even lied.
Well, and it's so interesting because Spielberg was such a big piece of whole entire generations of like growing up and going to see his films. And I'm in that space where most of my experiences with Steven Spielberg films were not in the theater because like
But
I was born in
on TV. Yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah, and like I had all the Indiana Jones movies on physical
yeah, yeah.
media and stuff like that. I'm trying to think what the first Spielberg film I actually saw in a theater was. But no, like obviously like E.T. and Raiders of the Lost Ark are some of these films that like sparked a whole entire generation.
Oh,
Uh
absolutely. I mean, yeah, yeah. I saw most of that stuff on a small television screen at
yeah,
home. And of course, that is only like 10% of the experience. And
yeah,
sometimes the same thing is like I was like 35 until it took me until I was 35 to see 2001 in a movie theater for the first time. I only saw it on like a
yeah.
little screen. And I mean, that's just like nothing. And then, oh wow, that's why people were so impressed by that film. Yeah. Anyhow,
That's one of
so
my
yeah.
favorite films, and that's one that's on my list of like next time that comes back into a theater, like I have to see this in a theater.
I recently saw it on 70 millimeter, and that
Very
is just
nice.
like, oh my God, that's
That's
fun.
something special for sure.
Yeah, but
I'm
but it's yeah, and always like I have to add the so I think there are two major, like the first film that I really saw, film that I saw was E.T., and also the first horror film I
Mhm.
saw was around the same time, like probably when I was like 8 or 9 or something like that. And it was on TV. My parents were outside doing barbecue, and I watched
Uh,
Poltergeist alone
oh,
on my own with like 8 or 9 years old. And oh my God, I was so terrified. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a privileged thing to say, but I think I probably was never as scared again in my life than in that moment in the dark
mhm.
watching Poltergeist. And it kind of like fizzled something out in my brain, I guess. Something, it
Absolutely.
short-circuited something. I don't know, but that was like a very intense thing to endure.
Absolutely. Now, I have a couple of favorite type questions. Do you have a particular favorite genre of movies?
Oh, uh, interesting. Like my favorite genre of movie is genre movie.
Yeah,
So I like fantasy and science fiction and that kind of stuff,
yeah.
and also interesting combinations with like fantastic elements
Mhm.
combined into films, and and also like documentaries a lot. But I'm not sure that documentary is even a genre. It's just like
I feel like most people call it one, but like I always appreciate when I get to talk to people who also love documentaries because I know a lot of people who don't go out of their way to watch documentaries. They'd much rather just focus on narrative films. But there's so many interesting things you could do with
Oh
documentaries
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I did
and
3 horror films and feature
Mhm.
films, and I did 3 documentaries. So my oeuvre, so to speak, is like 6 films now, and 3 of them are horror and 3 of them are documentaries. And the documentaries
There
are
you go.
also not straight up documentaries. I
Mhm.
just released like the one so because in 2024 Solvent came out and also my documentary Hacking at Leaves came out and I
Mhm.
just released it because I'm so frustrated about the situation of documentary films and everyone just like wants to watch the new Poop Cruise or something like that that I
Yep.
ran into the problem of like finding a distribution for the film because it's also kind of controversial. It deals with American colonialism
Yeah.
and the Navajo tribe and hacking and COVID, so all the stuff that people don't want to hear about. And so I couldn't find a distributor for it. And so I released it for free on the Internet Archive. So people can just like go
Interesting.
there and watch it there. So if you want to check it out, Hacking
Okay.
It Leaves, it's on the Internet Archive for free.
I'll definitely check it out. And you just struck a very specific feeling in my brain because that's the thing. Most documentaries that most people probably watch are just the ones that they throw on Netflix, and
Exactly.
they're either very much true crime, which anybody my age or even because like I'm a millennial and then like Gen Z love true crime documentaries for sure. And then yep, all those string of all those things like Poop Cruise and stuff like that certainly did come out this year on Netflix. And you know, there's so many things you can learn from documentaries, and those are the always the interesting ones are that challenge you and you actually get something out of. So I could definitely appreciate that for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are so many good documentaries out there and challenging documentaries, and they don't find their way like because I mean, I grew up, and I mean, I can say that as a filmmaker myself. Uh, Most of the things that I want to watch, I can't find them on streaming services, so I have to
Mhm.
end up like on Pirate Bay or something like that
Yeah,
because like where else would you find it, you know? And so I'm kind of happy that there is still this like strange cultural library
yeah,
called the torrent system because where else would I find like some weird ass, Filipino horror film from like
yeah.
1975 or something like that?
Well, and it's
You
really
know,
interesting because the Internet Archive has helped me find some things like especially like international films. Like it's a great way to like hone in on finding some of those films that just like because of rights issues and stuff like that, it's not going
yeah,
to be on a
yeah.
streaming service anytime soon. But thinking about like behind the camera, do you have any particular favorite filmmakers?
Do I have favorite filmmakers? I mean, of course, we already talked about like Steven Spielberg,
Yeah,
because I mean, of course, there is no. I mean, of course, that guy did something to my brain and to a lot
yeah,
of brains that is quite interesting. But um, it's so it is so hard to say that. I mean, there is this like strange and kind of sad story of an Austrian filmmaker who did one film in the 1980s called Angst. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Thanks.
Angst, Angst.
Hmm.
And it's like a film about a serial killer. And Gaspar Noé says it's one of his favorite films, one of his top
Interesting.
5 films ever. And and but doing that film, it got banned in so many countries, and it took years to come out. It kind of like broke the guy. The guy ended up doing commercials for all his life and not doing any films anymore. And it's such a strange, crazy uh, Austrian or in general story of indie filmmaking
Hmm.
that I think that guy, his name is Kargel, Kargl, Kargel. And and I can't say he's my favorite filmmaker, but I can relate so much to that
Hmm.
experience of like trying to do something, nobody understands it, and you I'm kind of happy that I never had that point in my life because of my hormonal system or whatever, that I kind of like decided, no, I'm not doing that anymore, because
Hmm.
I ran into problems a lot, and the money
Yeah.
and this and that, and sometimes you're just like, oh, I'm doing this shit, like
Yeah.
why am I exposing myself to that? Yeah. And I kept going, and
Hmm.
there are so many examples of cool filmmakers I would love to see their over the films they could have made if there would have been more support for them. And
Yeah.
I guess that guy is a good example,
What's
and
interesting
that's why I pick
is
him. Yeah,
this is actually streaming on AMC Plus and Shudder. Um, Angst. So might have to check that out. So there you go.
yeah.
Thinking about in front of the camera, do you have any particular actors or actresses that you gravitate towards?
Oh my God, there is like I'm kind of like working on my next film at the moment, and it's probably being going to be like a Canadian Austrian co-production.
Okay.
So we're going through the whole like financing thing at the moment, and hopefully shoot end of next year or early 27. It will be a science fiction film, sci-fi
Okay.
mystery, and I'm already like collecting names for that film. I
Mhm.
will not be able to afford most of them, but there are a
Yeah.
couple of, for example, I already contacted him. Uh, uh, there is I really love you remember like Star Trek Enterprise,
Mhm.
the one series that didn't work so well in the early
Yeah.
2000s and stuff like that,
Mhm.
the prequel to Star Trek and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's the guy who plays the Doctor. His name is John Billingsley,
Okay.
and John Billingsley has such a great voice and is such a likable
Mhm.
character. And every now and then he shows up. He was on Manhunt in a small role recently, the show about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln,
Mhm.
and he's in there, and it kind of reminded me of him. I said like, oh, that guy. And
Mhm.
and a friend of mine knows him, so we got in contact. So I'm just like, oh wow. And now we're already talking about the role and doing that. So at the moment,
Awesome.
I'm very much in the process of like thinking of people I really like that I
Mhm.
would like to work with, and
Mhm.
then of course not knowing if that will work out or not, but we'll see. But I mean, uh, there's a little role in my film where I only need the character for like probably a day of shooting or something like that. So already have like a
Mhm.
wish list of my favorites. John C.
Mhm.
Riley, for example, I'm a huge fan
Mhm.
of John C. Riley.
Yeah.
And it would be great to at least once in my life work with John C. Riley or Kyle MacLachlan, like
Yes.
would be great. Yeah. And or John Lithgow.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of John Lithgow. I just like recently saw him in what was it, the Rule of Jenny Penn, like a
Yes.
New Zealand
Him
horror
and
film.
Jeffrey Rush were
Oh,
fantastic
I
in that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a big fan of Paul Giamatti, for
Yep.
example. So that's a couple of the names
Mhm.
that are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But of course, yeah, we'll see. We'll try to get in contact with their agents and stuff like that, maybe for that little
Yeah.
role. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. I'll be pulling for you. I'm a big fan of John C. Riley because he can do everything. Because he's
Oh,
funny. He can do the
he's so
dramatic
funny.
elements. Yep.
I mean, what's the film where kind of like the teenage something. There's something wrong about Kevin. That's the name of the
Yep.
film. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
And that's a classic example of a really great John C. Riley who just like plays up a straight up like regular dad,
Yeah.
like, and he's
Hmm.
not funny at all, like, and
Hmm.
sometimes on Gangs of New York, so
Yeah.
where he's like the dramatic John C. Riley, and then here's this like incredibly funny John C. Riley in I don't know, like Talladega Nights. I have to say, like, I'm
Yes.
I'm a super huge fan of Talladega Nights because it I think it didn't even get a real distribution in Europe because nobody understands the jokes because nobody understands the brands.
Yeah.
If you don't know Shake and Bake, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in the States so often that I and my parents have a condo in Florida, so I'm going to that condo in Florida every year for at least 2 3 weeks. So I have like I know every fucking
Yeah.
Olive Garden in Central Florida. So
There you
so
go.
so I know like you can't understand America without understanding brands and what they
Yeah.
mean and what they relate to and what the Olive Garden is
This
in terms of like who goes there and what Applebee's is and all that stuff. And so it never worked in Austria or in Europe, but it is one of the funniest films ever
well
for me,
and
like about Americana.
well, and I think that is actually really important because, like, why is it funny that they're all having a nice family dinner with a bunch of soda and Dominoes?
Exactly.
And like, because like,
With the best line in comic history, where the small kids they're doing the Grace thing, like, and they're,
yeah,
they're they're complaining that he's always talking about baby Jesus and baby, but he
yeah,
was a grown man and blah blah blah. And then there's like he's finishing the Grace, and then the kid says like, "Oh, Dad, you made that Grace your bitch." And it's just like
yeah,
it's such a great. This is so America. It is so
yeah.
America in a nutshell. Like talking about like Trump and all that stuff. Like oh my God.
It is such a
Anyhow,
very
yeah.
specific brand of experience for sure.
Oh
Now,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
do you have a particular film that you feel like you could just watch literally like every day?
Every day, every day is harsh. Like speaking about Chauncey Riley, I just recently wrote a letterboxd review about that
Hmm.
because there is one feel-good film that most people don't understand why it's my feel-good film and why I watched it already 20
Hmm.
times and why I probably will watch it another 20 times until I croak is
Uh-huh.
Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
And Cedar
Yeah, I
Rapids is such a it's my warm blanket. If I'm feeling bad, I watch Cedar Rapids. And
I
it's also like a very much like a film about like the fly over America
yeah.
and the
Mm,
wonderfulness of it and the terror of it
yeah.
and yeah, anyhow, so I that's one. There's also interestingly a film that most people hate, and it's my guilty pleasure that I watch it way too often. It's a Kevin Costner film from the 90s called The Postman. And The
He
Postman is like it's probably a really bad movie, but there's
mm,
something about it that I really like, and I watch it every like 3 years or something like that. And it's so jingoistic and it's so weird and it's so
yeah.
I don't know, like Kevin Costner is restarting the American postal system,
Yeah.
and it's way too long, but there's something about it. I don't know what it is. There's something I also like. I can't remember the name of the guy, but I really like his antagonist. The guy who plays the leader of the feudal gang that is dominating everything, the Holnists or something.
I
Uh,
see Will Patton, maybe.
Will Yeah, exactly. That's him. He had also like a small role on Yellowstone, I think, or something like
Yep.
that recently and stuff like that. Yeah.
I
Anyhow,
appreciate Will Patton. He's a good character actor that
yeah,
pops up
yeah.
into some stuff. I actually listened to him. I listened to the audiobook of Killers of the Flower Moon,
Oh,
and he was one of the readers on it. It was like perfect voice for that for sure. Costner had a very interesting 90s because he was on like Top of the
oh yeah.
World with Dances with
And then
Wolves.
wonk.
And then The Postman in Waterworld was such like a crazy
Yeah, and it's
experience.
interesting that Postman and Waterworld pretty much like killed post-apocalyptic like mainstream
Yeah,
films for a long time, and then you can be happy that it kind of like came back with Mad Max and stuff.
yeah,
But yeah, but I mean honestly, it's really like a film that I really could watch very often and that I really really like, and it's not only like guilty pleasure. Something is
yeah,
Aliens. I'm a huge
yeah.
fan of Aliens.
Aliens is
Aliens is
incredible.
like incredibly rewatchable. And it's just like it's
Mhm.
almost like a perfect movie. And people who bitch about, like James Cameron, that guy is a good filmmaker. That guy is a good filmmaker, and he is, in the truest sense, an auteur. Although
Yeah,
people like would not put that together in their mind, having like multi-million dollar Avatar, whatever
yeah,
stuff, and auteur. But I mean, the guy is so in it, and it's just like they're multi-million dollar super successful products, but he's controlling everything. It's like his
exactly.
vision. and
Well,
and you can debate that if you like it or not, but I mean that guy is an auteur.
well, and I think that's very interesting because people write it off automatically because, the two Avatar films made $2 billion a piece, over $2 billion, and like Titanic's one of the most successful films of all time. But he does whatever he wants. Like that is fully his vision of things, and
His
he's so
vision, yeah.
dynamic because he understands technology so
Oh yeah.
well, and that's why he
And
can make these genre films.
you can watch Aliens nowadays and it doesn't look dated. I mean, some of
No,
the effects, of course, but like the tech they're using and everything looks just like what? I mean, you
yeah,
see films nowadays who kind of like copy the aesthetic of Aliens when they are trying to do
yeah,
like sci-fi and how the spaceships look and all that stuff. And of course, I mean, he's of course already like uh, I mean, culture is always copying other things,
yes,
like there's culture is always a copy of something and changing it and making it better or adapting it or using something from it. So of course we're all standing on giants, and
mhm,
James Cameron does the same thing. But it's just like so no, anyhow.
yeah. Well, and I'm a humongous Terminator fan, and T2 Judgment Day is just absolutely incredible and revolutionary in terms of like between that and Aliens, he really understands how to expand a story. Because, people complain about sequels all the time, but at least James Cameron really knows how to build off of a story and make something interesting with it for sure.
Terminator 2 and Aliens are probably the best sequels ever.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Now, do you have a particular film that you connect with closely because it relates to another interest of yours?
Hmm. That's a good question because I mean, I guess I'm gravitating towards certain films because they tickle my fancy.
Yeah.
So it is. So I mean, I'm a huge computer nerd.
Hmm.
So one of my favorite movies of all time is War Games, and
Yeah.
of course that's all dated and stuff like that. But I mean, the idea because I grew up in a time of like when we were still like doing the duck and cover stuff
Yeah.
under the table in elementary class because I mean, now with like Bigelow's new film, there's new debate now about nuclear war and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
the likeliness of nuclear war is higher now than it was in the 1980s, strangely. Yeah. But I remember like watching War Games and kind of like I could relate as a nerd to that
Yeah.
character, and I could relate to the interest he had, and I was also interested, and because of this like generational angst of the Cold War, of like the fear of like
Yeah.
nuclear confrontation and all that stuff. So yeah, yeah. What was your question? I forgot it
Well,
already.
well, so relating a film that related to an interest of yours, and
Oh yeah,
obviously you
exactly.
mentioned
Yeah,
you
yeah.
love
So War
computers.
Games is definitely there, and I would like to see more hacking related films because
Yeah.
nowadays I have the feeling that people are not doing realistic uh presentations of technology anymore, or they just like because everyone has like a phone in their pocket,
Yeah.
but most Gen Z folks see it as it's a black box for them. So
Yeah.
I had a conversation with the son of a friend who is now 12 or 13, the son of my friend, and he didn't know the difference between software and hardware.
Mhm.
And if you don't know that, if that is just like some stuff on a on something and you print, I mean, you have to understand how technology works to not to become a complete slave of it in a certain way. So
Yeah.
you have to like understand how the dynamics are behind it, the power relationships, how the technology works. And I'm fearing a little bit that by not talking also in films and in general how stuff works, that people kind of like lose an element of understanding that is important.
Well, and a lot of films that have like hacking and it just like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
keyboard smashing, and then
A
it's like,
friend
boom,
of mine
magically
tried
did it.
to yeah, a friend of mine tried to start a company in LA, a consulting company where they were offering their expertise as
Mm,
technologists to present that stuff in a more meaningful way, and that the stuff would actually fit the narrative and stuff like that. And
interesting.
most people said like, well, now we're not interested in that because people don't give a shit about it, And you're like, mm,
I guess most people can suspend their disbelief that smashing your fingers on the keyboard for
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
10 seconds will be like, we're hacked in. So there you go.
I think my favorite typing scene in any film is I think it's in Ghost in a Shell in the manga version where the guy starts typing, but his fingers extend,
Yeah.
and then he's like typing like this, and it's also so like 1980s or 1990s. It's not that maybe we change the interface in some way. No, we extend the computer like the fingers
Yeah.
so the fingers can type faster because the keyboard is so undebatable in that world that
Mhm.
you have to change the body to be able to use the keyboard faster. It's I love it.
Yeah, it's such an interesting film when it comes to technology for sure and the evolution of that. But Johannes, my last question for you
Mhm.
is what do you love most about movies?
What I like about movies is that there are two answers. The answer as a filmmaker is because I can try to shape something like a little emotional
Yeah.
machine, let's call it. And that emotional machine, uh, I can build it and I try it and then I release it into the public and I see how that little virus, that little
Mm,
machine is doing. And I can't control that anymore. It's out of my hand, but I
yeah.
like to make something and present it to the world and see what's happening with it. And as a consumer, I really like that it gives me the opportunity to to live another life
Yeah.
in a certain way. I guess that's pretty much it. Like just like being
Absolutely.
someone else and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I appreciate your time so much getting to talk with you about your film and
Hmm.
about, your love of film. So I always like to wrap up my show by giving my guests a chance to ask me a question. So what would you
Okay.
like to ask the Wasteland
Okay.
reviewer?
Yeah. I hope I didn't. I'm not spoiling anything or saying something I shouldn't say. But in our pre-conversation, you mentioned that in your business life, you're dealing with statistics a lot
Yeah.
and mathematics.
Yeah.
And my question to you would be, do you see a connection between statistics and mathematics and the business and the art form of filmmaking?
Well, it's interesting because obviously from like the business perspective, numbers are everywhere. So like I am the type of person like I go on Box Office Mojo and look at box office numbers and stuff like that because I love numbers.
Mhm.
And looking at that type of stuff and on some level it's like this film that I think is really interesting. I really hope that this has legs and it'll make money and we get more films like that. But just from like that general standpoint, at the end of the day, you can't make a movie without some money in general, and that's such an important piece to it. And it's also very interesting to see, you know, there's so many things you could do with $300 million, but it's also really interesting to see what somebody can do with like $20,000 or something
Exactly.
like that, and how creative people can be with the money that they have. And thinking about like that aspect, that's interesting. But it's very interesting because so I run a tutoring center as my full-time job and I teach on the side. I used to do a prompt with some of my tutors for training, and it's how is writing a poem like a math equation?
Hmm.
And having them have to process out because like we're writing an essay like a math equation. And this is very interesting in terms of like how I write and how my brain is functioning. Cause like always think about, well, I have my introduction, I have my hook, I have my conclusion, wrapping things up. I have this piece, this piece, this piece, how I'm thinking about how I'm structuring my thoughts on this. And that's how my brain works. So like I have a lot of structure in just how I think about things. And you know, I know in school it's like a 5 paragraph essay. Well, it's just an equation. You're plugging in pieces into putting this all together. And film, it's like if you think about like the 3 act structure that you're supposed to follow, any kind of structure or format that you put on something has a systematic and mathematical perspective to it.
Oh yeah,
And
save the cats.
it's always interesting when people break that and how people react to it. Because it's like this didn't play out how it was supposed to play out. I'm like, well, that's interesting. But not everybody's up for interesting. They like safe. And it's like why all these Netflix movies feel the same. They all have a formula and they're all hitting like check boxes and like hitting this demographic, this demographic, this demographic. So much of the business of art is trying to cover bases and hitting target audiences, and it's all numbers. It's all perspective, it's all statistics. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about it that way. And like I even mentioned to you, like I have a buddy who the first thing out of his mouth after he sees that I saw something, he's like, what would you rate it? I'm like, wouldn't you rather hear my thoughts on it instead of me just putting a number on it? And I actually stopped putting grades on my reviews on my YouTube channel years ago. Because if you really want to hear my thoughts on the film, listen to the video. I try to give a perspective of like this is where the film went. This might work for some people, this might not
Yeah,
work for some
yeah,
people. And at the end of the day, just because I love something or because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it's not going to work for you.
yeah,
And I try to
absolutely.
give that kind of perspective, but like me being like, I give this a 5 out of 5 means nothing to you unless you
Exactly,
already
because
know that.
we don't know the reference system that you were
Yeah,
talking about. Yeah. I mean, I find it super interesting that, like, especially on Letterboxd and seeing stuff. So I see people write a really, for example, Masking Threshold, the main character. I mean, it's the
yeah,
same, I guess, also in Solvent. The main character is an asshole. Like,
yeah,
he's not a likable character. Yeah. And people write a really good review of the film, and then they give it like a 1 star rating because something in their mind can't give such a despicable character. It's almost like a moral rating, uh,
yeah,
additionally to a rating of like, because of course, yeah, I mean, I made a film deliberately about an asshole. That's my
yeah,
creative choice that I could. Yeah, it's not reflecting on you that you hate him or like him or whatever it is, but it's fun how those mechanisms can completely shift ratings.
yeah. Well, and I know one of my favorite films of all time is There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it's like people are like, Daniel Plainview is not the protagonist, he's the antagonist of the film. It's like, well, no, he is the protagonist of the film. It is his story, it's his journey, but he's not a good person.
No,
And
no,
I feel
no.
like I think people struggle with the difference between protagonist and antagonist. Protagonist is who we follow on this journey. The antagonist is who is going against their journey. A hero and a villain is a moral thing.
Yeah.
And like Daniel Plainview is an incredibly interesting protagonist, but he is also a villainous person because he is a complete bastard and a
Absolutely.
horrible
He
person.
drinks the milkshake.
Yep. Well, and it's so interesting because his antagonist in the film is somebody who's equally as bad, just from a different perspective. Eli Sunday,
Yeah,
who it's like
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
you have the business and you have the religion and
yeah.
how those
There's
things
in
conflict.
yeah, in my film, I guess there is also like what I see in reviews is that I think there might also be an interesting clash between what Generation X people like and what Generation Z people like. Because
100%.
Generation X people like a lot of ambiguous characters. They like people that are broken and stuff like that. Everything is morally kind of like not a little bit shady. And like with the whole debate about wokeness and all that stuff, like
Yeah.
Gen Z is a little bit more moralistic about that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And for example, in my film, there's not a single likable character. They're all broken. You know, they're
Yeah.
all like even Christina is kind of like when she has the opportunity to like bullying her colleague because she's
Yeah.
vaping and she hates her because she's Austrian or something like that. So there's not a single likable character in the film, and for some people that is a challenge
Mhm.
to like, oh
Well,
my God, what who am I rooting for? What is this?
so I do one of my pet projects at work is I do a business movie night each semester where we put on a film that shows business in some perspective. Because like
Hmm.
I I supervise all the tutoring for business courses. I teach in the School of Business at my university. And last fall, we watched 9 to 5. It's
Oh yeah,
very easy to tell who we're rooting for in this movie. Like Dabney Coleman's a piece of crap, and obviously we don't like him.
yeah, yeah.
And we love the three women at the center of it. But then I showed them Glengarry Glen Ross this
Ah,
couple weeks ago, and almost nobody in this movie is a good person.
yeah,
And I could see them squirming, some of the students just feeling really uncomfortable watching this movie. I'm like, well, you should, because that's the point. And processing the fact that these are all desperate people who go to desperate measures because they're put in desperate situations. And just because there's somebody going through something doesn't also mean they're not a great person.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
very interest it was an interesting experience.
yeah.
But
You should show them one of my favorite movies, Margin Call.
okay.
Have you seen
I
it?
I have not seen Margin Call.
Watch Margin Call. I mean, Kevin Spacey is in it.
Yeah.
Like that's always, of course, like a complication. But
Well,
I mean, it
he was
is
in
like
Glengarry Glen Ross too, so they
okay, yeah,
watched
yeah.
that.
No,
So
Margin Call is probably the best movie ever made about the 2008 crisis and the collapse, the
interesting.
near collapse of global economy.
Oh, and this is from the filmmaker of I Love a Most Violent Year, with Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain. This seems really
Yeah.
interesting. The tricky thing is you have to films that are available through Canopy because I don't have $600 to
Oh
screen.
shit.
Uh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
always
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
always the challenging thing because I'm like, I have all these films I want to show them, and it's just like, well, that's going to cost you $700. I'm like, well, never mind. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Oh my
I'll look
God.
into it though. I'll
Yeah,
definitely keep that
but
in mind.
definitely check out the movie. It's a really
Yeah,
great movie. If
uh,
it's uh good evening, good strange evening to have with that film.
there you go. But Johannes, thank you so much for coming on and talking some movies with me.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. I congratulate you to your wonderful collection behind you.
Thank you.
I was already seeing that when I watched your review of my film,
Mm.
and I was like, oh my God, that's a lot of DVDs there, Blu-rays and stuff like
And there's
that.
more over there
Nice.
too. It's
That's a
wild.
good statistic right there for you.
Oh, I have spreadsheets to keep track of a lot of things.
Oh,
My
wonderful.
brain works. But and hopefully everybody goes check out Solvent. It is a challenging and engaging and interesting film for sure. But thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.